It has been some time, has it not, since we last saw the once illustrious name of Elmswood grace the pages of our society papers? Ah, how quickly fortunes turn, and how swift the fall from grace. Even now, one hears tales of the formidable Marchioness, bearing their diminished circumstances with a dignity few could muster. But even in the quietest corners, beneath the humblest of roofs, talent, like a defiant blossom, can refuse to be forgotten. And where there is talent, my dears, there is always the potential for intrigue. The morning mist still clung to the gnarled oaks surrounding Thornwood Cottage, shrouding its modest existence in a soft grey veil. It was a cruel mockery of the sprawling, sun-drenched acres that once belonged to the Marquess of Elmswood. Here, in this cramped, draughty dwelling, lived Lady Arabelle Belle Elmswood, her name still echoing with the faded glory of a family brought low by the relentless tick-tock of debt. Her father, the Marquess, a man whose spirit had once soared as high as his fortunes, now spent his days cloistered in his study, the faint scent of aged brandy and despair clinging to the air. His pride, however, remained an unyielding, if invisible, bastion around their penury. Belle moved through the cottage with a quiet efficiency born of necessity. Her fingers, once destined for delicate embroidery and turning pages of poetry, now adept at tasks unimaginable to her former station. Dust motes danced in the sparse sunlight that pierced the cottage window, illuminating the stark reality of their decline. Her mother, the Marchioness of Elmswood, a woman of remarkable composure whose vivacious spirit had once brightened grand ballrooms, now tended their small garden with the same meticulous care she once bestowed upon vast rosebeds, her unwavering presence a silent testament to their shared, enduring strength. Her family's very survival and their collective dignity depended on Belle's secret. "Belle, my dear," the Marquess's voice, frail yet edged with its customary command, drifted from his study. "Have you seen my spectacles? I swear, the mice grow bolder by the day in this rustic abode." Belle appeared at his door, a faint smudge of ash on her cheek from tending the morning fire. "They are on the mantelpiece, Papa, just where you left them." She retrieved the spectacles, carefully placing them in his trembling hand. "Ah, yes, my memory, alas, is not what it once was," he sighed, adjusting them. His gaze, clouded with a melancholic fog, fell upon her. "You are looking rather weary, child. This country air does not suit you as it once did. Your mother always said it was too damp for delicate constitutions." He coughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Nonsense, Papa," Belle replied, forcing a bright smile. "The air is invigorating, and the quiet allows for much contemplation." She longed to tell him of her daily treks to Harbridge Hall, the whispered instructions, the small hands she guided through their lessons. But his pride, so fragile now, would shatter, and her mother would only worry. He believed she merely tutored the local vicar's children, a gentle deception she maintained with careful precision. Later that afternoon, Belle found herself seated at the grand pianoforte in Harbridge Hall, its polished surface reflecting the afternoon sun. The Harbridge children, Master Thomas and young Miss Clara, were happily occupied with their piano lesson after having tea and ginger biscuits in the adjacent nursery, their governess, Miss Finch, having conveniently taken ill. This small favor, a substitute position arranged through a discreet agency, was a godsend. Belle's fingers, longing for the feel of proper ivory keys, danced across them. She wasn't meant to play for pleasure, only for the children's instruction, but the allure was irresistible. She let her own composition, a melody she had titled Whispers in G minor, flow from her soul. It was a poignant, intricate piece, weaving longing and resilience into its every note. Her voice, a soft, ethereal hum, accompanied the melancholic strains. "Such beautiful music, Miss Levington," the Countess of Harbridge's voice, surprisingly soft, drifted from the doorway. Belle's hands stilled on the keys, her heart leaping. "I had no idea you possessed such artistry." The children are quite enraptured. Her eyes, however, held a flicker of something Belle couldn't quite discern. Admiration, yes, but perhaps something else. Belle simply smiled and curtsied, her cheeks warming. The Countess, a woman of impeccable social standing and even more impeccable ambition, had recently learned that her younger sister, Lady Felicity Montrose, was to arrive shortly. Lady Felicity, a celebrated beauty and the Countess's keenest project, was due to make her entrance into society with one express purpose: to capture a duke. And whispers, thick as London fog, suggested the reclusive Duke of Windmere was finally in search of a Duchess. One must always commend a young lady for finding honest work, even if it is far below her presumed station, especially when one's dear mother, a paragon of resilience, watches on, hoping for better days. But mark my words, dear readers, talent, like ambition, rarely stays confined to the nursery, especially when a certain duke, notoriously immune to superficial charms, is rumoured to be making an appearance at the Harbridge ball. And Lady Felicity, bless her ambitious heart, is already poised to strike. Oh, the games that are about to begin! The air was thick with expectation, dear readers, for the Harbridge ball promised not merely lavish refreshments and dizzying waltzes, but the rarest of sightings: the Duke of Windmere himself, a man notoriously averse to the very notion of matrimony, yet now rumoured to be on the hunt for a Duchess. The atmosphere crackled with the ambition of every unattached female and the hopeful strategies of their mammas. Little did they know, the Duke's preference leaned not towards the brightest jewel, but perhaps the hidden melody. The Harbridge ball was a symphony of silk, scandal, and strained smiles. Chandeliers dripped light onto a swirling kaleidoscope of dancers, their laughter and flirtations forming a cacophony that grated on the highly discerning sensibilities of Julian Blackwell, the Duke of Windmere. He had made his requisite appearance, endured the introductions, and deflected no fewer than half a dozen thinly veiled inquiries into his marital intentions. The relentless pursuit of matchmaking mammas and their simpering daughters was more exhausting than a week of estate management. "Your Grace, I trust you find the evening." Lady Harrington purred, her fan fluttering like a hummingbird's wings, drawing his attention to her rather plump, if amiable, daughter. "As diverting as a prolonged visit to a particularly boisterous market, Lady Harrington," Julian replied, his voice smooth, though a flicker of weariness crossed his aristocratic features. He offered a polite bow, and seizing a moment of distraction, slipped away from the throng, seeking refuge from the gilded cage of society. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors of Harbridge Hall, the distant strains of the orchestra fading as he ventured further from the ballroom. He sought a quiet drawing-room, a library, any sanctuary from the relentless hum of ambition. His footsteps eventually led him towards a less frequented wing, near what he surmised to be the family's private chambers and the nursery. It was there, from a partially open door, that a sound, subtle yet profound, caught his ear. It was the gentle, intricate melody of a pianoforte, not the grand flourish of a ballroom, but something exquisitely tender, woven with a quiet melancholy. And beneath it, a voice, soft as a sigh, humming in perfect harmony. He paused, captivated. The music was unlike anything he had heard in the tons more fashionable drawing rooms. It possessed a raw honesty, a profound depth of feeling that resonated with his own often reserved spirit. Discretion forgotten, He pushed the door open just enough to peer inside. There, bathed in the soft glow of a single lamp, sat a figure at the grand pianoforte. It was not one of the Harbridge family, nor a guest of the ball. It was the governess, Miss Levington, her head bent slightly over the keys, her fingers dancing across the ivory with an effortless grace. Two small children, Master Thomas and Miss Clara, lay curled upon a nearby settee, lulled to sleep by the haunting beauty of the lullaby. Her face, in the soft light, was illuminated by an almost ethereal glow, reflecting the profound emotion she poured into the music. It was a piece Belle had titled Whispers in G minor, a melody intimately tied to her most profound longings and the quiet resilience she clung to. Julian watched, mesmerized. Her plain gown seemed to vanish, replaced by the sheer artistry of her performance. The world outside, the clamor of the ball, Lady Harrington's insistent fan, all faded. Here was authenticity. Here was talent. He cleared his throat softly, a polite interruption. Belle's hands flew from the keys, her head snapping up, her face flushing crimson as she saw the Duke standing in the doorway, his silhouette imposing, his gaze intensely fixed upon her. "Your Grace," she whispered, rising quickly, a deep curtsy her immediate, instinctive response, despite her surprise. I beg your pardon. I did not realize anyone was present. I was merely soothing the children." "Indeed," Julian murmured, his gaze sweeping over her, taking in the elegant curve of her neck, the startled intelligence in her hazel eyes. "And you do so with an artistry that quite transcends the ordinary. That melody, it is quite exquisite. Is it your own composition?" Belle's blush deepened. "It is, a trifle, Your Grace, a simple tune for the children." She glanced at the sleeping forms, eager to deflect the conversation, to retreat into the shadows that her position commanded. Julian, however, was not so easily dissuaded. "A trifle?" he repeated, a faint, intrigued smile playing on his lips. "Miss Levington, a trifle, does not possess such profound sentiment. I assure you, my ears are rarely so captivated. Perhaps you would honor me by playing it again at a more appropriate hour." His gaze was direct, unwavering, and Belle felt a tremor run through her. This man, so notoriously aloof, was truly interested in her music. Before she could reply, a rustle of silk announced another presence. Lady Felicity Montrose, radiant in a rich tangerine off-shoulder satin gown, glided into the doorway, her smile as dazzling as her diamonds. She had, as ever, been looking for the Duke. Her eyes, however, narrowed almost imperceptibly as she took in the scene. The Duke, captivated, looking at the governess. "Your Grace, there you are," Lady Felicity exclaimed, her voice a little too bright, a little too loud. "We were quite worried you had been swept away by one of the older dowagers. Are you quite well? And what is this dull tune?" She cast a dismissive glance at Belle. "Surely you would prefer to join us for a proper waltz." She extended a gloved hand towards the Duke, her smile unwavering, but her eyes held a distinct, calculating glint. Julian's gaze lingered on Belle for a moment longer, a silent message passing between them before he reluctantly turned to Lady Felicity. "Lady Felicity, indeed, a waltz would be quite invigorating." He took her offered arm, his attention outwardly given, but his mind still lingered on the haunting melody that had ceased. Belle watched them retreat, a strange mix of relief and disappointment washing over her. The Duke's interest had been fleeting, a moment of unexpected connection that now, like the last note of her waltz, faded into the grand, indifferent hum of society. Well, dear readers, it seems even the reclusive Duke of Windmere is not immune to the siren song of a lively ball. And to think he was discovered not in the company of a Duchess in waiting, but a mere governess, One must hope his discerning taste extends beyond nursery lullabies, particularly when the exquisite Lady Felicity Montrose has made her grand entrance. The hunt for a duke, it seems, has officially begun. Oh, the mornings after a grand ball are always rife with speculation, are they not, dear readers? And when a duke shows unexpected interest in a wallflower, in this case, a governess, the whispers become veritable gales. One can almost hear the rustle of silks as ambitious mothers and cunning sisters adjust their strategies. And the Countess of Harbridge, known for her impeccable foresight and, one might add, her formidable will. A gentle suggestion can often carry the weight of a royal decree. The morning after the ball dawned bright and deceptively serene. Belle, still haunted by the Duke's discerning gaze and the unexpected warmth of his words, moved through her governess duties with a quiet distraction. The children, still sleepy from the late hours, were easily managed, allowing Belle's thoughts to drift back to the fleeting connection in the drawing room. His interest in her music, a solace she had guarded so fiercely, felt like a precious, fragile gift. Her reverie was broken by the sharp rap of the Countess of Harbridge's maid at the nursery door. "Miss Levington, the Countess requests your presence in her private sitting room immediately." Belle's heart gave a nervous flutter. The Countess rarely summoned her, and never with such urgency. She straightened her modest day dress, smoothed her hair, and followed the maid, a sense of foreboding settling over her. The Countess's sitting room was bathed in sunlight, yet felt oddly cold. Lady Felicity Montrose sat opposite her sister, a small, triumphant smile playing on her lips as Belle entered. The Countess, impeccably dressed even at this hour, gestured to a chair. "Good morning, Miss Levington," the Countess began, her voice cool and measured, devoid of the soft admiration of the previous day. "I trust you slept well after such a stimulating evening." Her eyes, however, were shrewd, assessing. "Quite well, thank you, your ladyship," Belle replied, her posture prim, her gaze steady despite the tremor in her hands. "Excellent." The Countess took a delicate sip of tea. "Now, Miss Levington, I must speak plainly. My sister, Lady Felicity, is staying with us for the season. Her primary purpose, as you might imagine, is to secure a suitable match. And certain attentions, paid last night, have given us cause for concern." Belle stiffened, her gaze flicking to Lady Felicity, who now merely smiled, her triumph barely concealed. "The Duke of Windmere, Miss Levington," the Countess continued, her tone hardening imperceptibly, "is a gentleman of the highest consequence. His interest, though perhaps born of novelty, could be misconstrued. My sister, as you know, is perfectly positioned to capture his esteem. Your ladyship, I assure you, my interactions with His Grace were entirely innocent," Belle protested, her voice quiet but firm. "He merely expressed an interest in the music I was playing for the children." Lady Felicity let out a delicate, affected cough. "Oh, sister, perhaps Miss Levington simply misunderstood the Duke's customary politeness." Her eyes, however, glittered with malice as she looked at Belle. The Countess fixed Belle with a chilling stare. "Be that as it may, Miss Levington, appearances are everything, and a governess, however talented, must understand her place. My sister's future, and indeed our family's standing, rests upon this season. Your presence, particularly your musical pursuits, is causing undue distraction. It is making Lady Felicity quite uncomfortable." Belle's jaw tightened. This was not a request, but a direct order, veiled in concern. "I understand, your ladyship," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Good." The Countess leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, intense tone, laced with an unmistakable threat. And let us be clear, Miss Levington, I am aware of your unique circumstances, your former family name, and the unfortunate debts that cling to it. It would be a most regrettable scandal, would it not, if such information were to become common knowledge. The Marquess of Elmswood's dignity, already so fragile, would be utterly shattered, and I dare say Mr. Silas Blackwood is a man of little patience when exposed to public scrutiny regarding his debtors. Belle felt the blood drain from her face, her secret, their carefully guarded shame, exposed. The full weight of the blackmail pressed down upon her, crushing the last vestiges of hope. You would not," she breathed, her voice trembling. "I assure you I would," the Countess said, a cold, unyielding smile touching her lips. "So, let us have a clear understanding, Miss Levington. You will cease all interactions with the Duke of Windmere. You will remain within your proper station. Your musical performances will cease to draw any attention. Or, I promise you, the Marquess of Elmswood's creditors will descend upon Thornwood Cottage like a flock of hungry ravens, leaving naught but ruin." Belle simply stared, her face pale. The choice was stark. Her own fleeting connection, or the utter devastation of her family. "I understand, your ladyship," she whispered, her voice devoid of inflection, a profound sense of despair settling over her. She bowed, a deep, formal curtsy that masked the turmoil within, and retreated, leaving the Countess and Lady Felicity to their quiet, shared triumph. The music, the Duke's discerning gazelle of it, felt like a dream, now replaced by the cold, hard reality of her forced silence. Ah, dear readers, the waters are truly muddied now. The Countess has played her hand, and with chilling precision. One wonders, however, if a spirit as artistic and resilient as Miss Levington's can truly be stifled. And the Duke? Is he truly so easily deterred? Or will his discerning nature see beyond the carefully constructed facades of society? Only time, and perhaps a few more whispers, will tell. Oh, the Tun, my dears, is a grand theatre, and its players often believe themselves masters of their roles. But even the most accomplished actress can forget her lines, and a true connoisseur of the arts can always discern a false note. The Duke of Windmere, it seems, possessed an ear far too discerning for the Countess's delicate manipulations. The Duke of Windmere found himself increasingly puzzled by the sudden, stark change in Miss Levington. After their captivating encounter in the drawing-room, he had fully intended to seek her out again, perhaps under the guise of inquiring about the children's studies, or simply to engage in more of that rare, intelligent conversation. Yet she now seemed to actively avoid him. When their paths crossed, her eyes would dart away, and she would offer only a stiff curtsy and the briefest of responses, retreating swiftly as if pursued by a phantom. He was not one to easily dismiss a genuine connection, especially one forged through shared appreciation of such profound artistry. Her sudden coldness felt imposed. It gnawed at him, a subtle discord in the otherwise predictable harmony of his days. "Your Grace," Lady Felicity Montrose simpered at a subsequent garden party at Harbridge Hall, drawing his attention away from a rather fascinating discussion on agricultural reforms. "I have quite surprised myself. I've taken to the pianoforte with an ardor I never knew I possessed." She gestured towards the Countess, who beamed proudly. "My sister insisted I cultivate my talents." "Indeed," Julian replied, his brow subtly arching. He had noted Lady Felicity's sudden enthusiasm for music over the past weeks. She now frequently held court in the drawing-room, her fingers moving over the keys with an almost frantic energy. "Oh, yes," Felicity trilled. "And I have even composed a little something myself. A rather quaint waltz, I think. I call it Felicity's Fancies." She then launched into a melody that struck Julian immediately. It was the lullaby. The intricate, poignant whispers in G minor that Miss Levington had played. Julian listened intently, his expression unreadable. Felicity played with technical proficiency, hitting every note, following the score with admirable precision. Yet there was a hollowness, a lack of the raw, heart-wrenching emotion he remembered. It was as if she were reading notes from a page, rather than pouring her soul into them. The nuances, the hesitant pauses, the very breath of the melody he had heard from Miss Levington were absent. It was the tune, yes, but not the same song. "Remarkable, Lady Felicity," Julian said, offering a polite applause, his gaze still fixed on her, analyzing. "A most charming composition. You play with admirable skill." "Oh, your Grace, you are too kind." Felicity giggled, preening under his attention. "It simply came to me, a burst of inspiration." Later that evening, as he moved through the crowded drawing room, Julian discreetly observed Miss Levington. She stood near a window, a pale, almost ethereal figure, her eyes fixed on Felicity's performance, with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Was it pain? Resignation? He saw her fingers subtly clench at her sides, a fleeting, almost imperceptible tremor. The pieces Felicity continued to play at various gatherings, several more waltzes, a haunting nocturne, even a lively jiggle, carried the same unmistakable stylistic signature, the same distinctive turn of phrase that had captivated him from Miss Levington's casual playing. Yet, each time, Felicity's performance, though technically sound, felt like a beautifully rendered copy, lacking the original's vibrant soul. The Duke's suspicion solidified into a cold certainty. Miss Levington's sudden withdrawal, the Countess's pointed remarks about distraction, and now Lady Felicity's convenient discovery of such original musical talent. It was too much of a coincidence. Something was deeply, fundamentally amiss. He knew genuine artistry when he heard it. And this, coming from Lady Felicity, was a performance, not a creation. He resolved then that he would uncover the truth. The spirited Miss Levington, with her profound musical soul, was either being silenced or, worse, wronged. And the Duke of Windmere was not a man to stand idly by when such injustice unfolded under his very nose. One might think, my dear readers, that a duke's attentions, once diverted, are easily forgotten. But some gentlemen, unlike the more fickle members of our society, possess a rather inconvenient memory for genuine beauty and a keen ear for authenticity. The Countess and her sister may believe their melody is well played, but a certain patron of the arts is beginning to hear a most discordant note, and when a duke investigates, even the most artfully constructed charade can crumble. The tun, my dear readers, is a garden. Some flowers flaunt their vibrant hues, drawing all admiration. Others, though perhaps more exquisite, wither in the shadows, unacknowledged. Yet, a truly discerning gardener knows the difference between a blossom cultivated with care and one merely painted to deceive. The Duke of Windmere, it seems, possessed an eye for more than just surface beauty, and a peculiar fascination with those melodies that resonated with the soul rather than merely assaulted the ear. And when a duke becomes inquisitive, even the most artfully concealed secrets have a habit of revealing themselves. The days following the Countess of Harbridge's decisive intervention were, for Belle, a desolate landscape. She walked through her duties like a phantom, her heart a leaden weight in her chest. The grand piano, once her sanctuary, now felt like a taunting sentinel, its silent keys a constant reminder of the music she dared not play, the connection she dared not pursue. When the Duke's path inadvertently crossed hers, in the hall briefly, while overseeing the children's outdoor play, or at supper, where she sat, as always, at the lower end of the table. She would offer the stiffest of curtsies, her gaze fixed rigidly on some point beyond his shoulder, her responses clipped and utterly devoid of the warmth he had glimpsed. She felt his eyes upon her, a subtle pressure, and knew that her forced indifference must wound, yet she saw no alternative. The thought of Mr. Silas Blackwood, a shadowy figure of ruthless reputation, descending upon Thornwood Cottage, was a torment far worse than her own disappointment. Meanwhile, Julian Blackwell, Duke of Windmere, found himself increasingly consumed by the curious case of Miss Levington. Her sudden withdrawal, the almost unnatural coldness in her usually expressive eyes, and Lady Felicity's conveniently blossoming musical genius all coalesced into a deeply unsettling puzzle. He was not a man swayed by fleeting whims. His interest in Miss Levington's music had been profound, her talent undeniable. To see her reduced to such a meek cipher stirred a quiet outrage within him. That evening, in the quiet grandeur of his study at Windmere House, a snifter of brandy warming his hand, Julian addressed his confidential secretary, Mr. Alistair Finch. Finch, a man of discreet efficiency and sharp intellect, had served the Windmere family for 2 decades. "Finch," Julian began, his voice low, his eyes fixed on the flickering fire, "you have observed the recent shift in the social currents, I trust?" "Indeed, Your Grace. Lady Felicity Montrose's remarkable surge in musical talent has been the talk of every drawing-room. Quite the prodigy, some are calling her, seemingly overnight." Finch's tone was impeccably neutral, but Julian detected the faint, cynical curl of his lip. "Precisely," Julian acknowledged. "And Miss Levington, the governess at Harbridge Hall, has she seemed altered to you since the ball?" Finch adjusted his spectacles. "She has, Your Grace. Notably so. From a quiet, yet undeniably present figure, she has retreated into a shell. Her duties are performed with utmost precision, but there is a distinct lack of her former inner light, one might say." Julian nodded slowly. "My thoughts exactly. Finch, I have a task for you, one requiring the utmost discretion. I wish to know everything about Miss Levington, her background, her family, her true circumstances, and concurrently, I wish to know more of Lady Felicity's musical instruction. Where did she acquire such a sudden, prodigious talent? Did she study with any renowned masters? Or was this indeed a spontaneous burst of inspiration, as she claims?" Finch's eyes, usually impassive, showed a flicker of understanding. "Your Grace implies a deception?" "I imply nothing, Finch," Julian said, his gaze hardening. "I merely seek the truth. Begin by inquiring into the governess agencies, and perhaps a discreet conversation with any long-serving staff at Harbridge Hall who might have observed the shifts in household dynamics. As for Lady Felicity, a few subtle questions at musical salons, a casual inquiry into her past tutors. I trust your usual methods." Over the next few days, Finch moved through London's intricate network of polite society and its less visible underbelly. His inquiries yielded fascinating, if disturbing, results. Julian received a report from Finch a week later. It was damning. "Your Grace," Finch began, holding a slim file, "Miss Levington's true identity is indeed Lady Arabelle Elmswood. Her family, the Marquesses of Elmswood, suffered a catastrophic financial collapse approximately 2 years ago. The late Marquess, her grandfather, accumulated colossal gambling debts, inherited by her father, the current Marquess. Their grand estate was lost. They now reside in a remote, modest cottage in Kent, barely escaping ruin. The governess position, it seems, was a desperate measure to preserve their remaining dignity and ward off complete destitution." Julian's jaw tightened. "And the creditors?" "A Mr. Silas Blackwood holds the bulk of the outstanding debts, Your Grace. A man of formidable reputation, known for his ruthless efficiency in collecting what is owed. His agents are said to be circling the Elmswoods' last remaining property, a small but cherished ancestral cottage awaiting any opportunity to seize it. And Lady Felicity's musical genius? Julian pressed, his voice taut. Finch permitted himself a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. No record of any advanced musical training, Your Grace. Her previous tutors, when contacted discreetly, spoke of a charming but rather indifferent pupil, whose patience for scales rarely outlasted a quarter hour. As for the compositions, one of my agents, a former valet who once served at a particularly gossipy country estate, recalled Lady Felicity's particular admiration for the compositions played by Lady Arabelle Elmswood before her family's decline. Lady Arabelle herself, even in her bloom, was known in certain artistic circles as a prodigious pianist and composer, albeit one who shied from public accolades. Julian slammed his fist softly on his desk, the sound muffled by the leather. So, it is precisely as I suspected. The Countess, knowing Miss Levington's true identity and her family's vulnerability, used it as leverage. She blackmailed her into silence, into stepping aside for her ambitious sister, while Felicity paraded as the talent's rightful owner. That appears to be the logical conclusion, Your Grace, Finch confirmed. The timing of Lady Arabelle's withdrawal and Lady Felicity's sudden inspiration is too precise to be mere coincidence. The pieces Lady Felicity performs are indeed almost exact renditions of those previously known to be Lady Arabelle's, though, if I may be so bold, Your Grace, Lady Felicity's touch lacks the emotional depth Lady Arabelle was renowned for. Julian stood, his gaze hard, resolute. Then the truth must be brought to light, and the Marchioness of Elmswood and her daughter shall not suffer for another's avarice and deceit. He had a strong sense of justice, and the methodical injustice done to Lady Arabelle, a woman of such quiet strength and profound talent, stirred a deep anger within him. He now had the pieces of the puzzle. Now he needed the means to present it to the world irrevocably. The tongue may believe itself a master of illusion, dear readers, but even the most cunning puppet master can be outmaneuvered when a truly sharp eye begins to discern the strings. The Duke of Windmere, it seems, has pulled back the curtain, and what he has found behind the dazzling facade of Lady Felicity Montrose's sudden talent is not inspiration, but something far more scandalous. The stage is set, my dears, not for a ball, but for a reckoning, and the music, I assure you, will be anything but harmonious for certain parties. The air crackles with anticipation, my dearest readers, for tonight the ton gathers not merely for champagne and idle chatter, but for a spectacle of rare proportions. Whispers have reached even the most secluded country estates, whispers of a duke whose justice is as sharp as his intellect, and a certain musical performance that promises to hit a most discordant note for some. Harbridge Hall, once a stage for polite deceptions, is about to witness a truth unveiled, a symphony of scandal that will surely leave jaws agape and reputations, well, utterly shattered. The grand musical soirée at Windmere House was abuzz with London's elite. Chandeliers cast a dazzling glow upon the shimmering silks and polished tailcoats, but beneath the veneer of polite conversation, a palpable tension hummed. The Duke of Windmere, Julian Blackwell, typically a man of quiet presence, moved through the room with an unusual resolve, his gaze often drifting towards the entrance. Lady Felicity Montrose, radiant in a gown of brilliant gold, clung to the arm of her sister, the Countess of Harbridge, both wearing expressions of confident anticipation, though a subtle nervousness flickered in Felicity's eyes. They were aware the Duke had orchestrated this particular event, but their true purpose remained shrouded in speculation. Then a ripple moved through the crowd. The Duke had paused by the entrance, extending his arm, not to a Duchess in waiting, but to a figure who, though elegantly dressed in a simple yet exquisite gown of deep pink, was undeniably Lady Arabelle Elmswood. Her presence here, escorted by the Duke himself, sent a wave of hushed gasps and frantic fan fluttering through the assembly. Her mother, the Marchioness, stood proudly beside her, her composure a shield against the curious stares, while the Marquess, pale but resolute, stood a little apart. Julian led Belle to the centre of the grand drawing-room, where a magnificent pianoforte stood ready. He turned to face the assembled guests, his voice cutting through the murmurs with quiet authority. "My lords, ladies, and gentlemen," Julian began, his voice clear and resonant, commanding immediate silence. "I thank you for gracing Windmere House tonight. We are gathered not just for an evening of musical entertainment, but for an unveiling of extraordinary talent, and indeed of truth." Lady Felicity's triumphant smile faltered, her hand instinctively clutching the Countess's arm. The Countess's face remained impassive, but her eyes narrowed, fixed on Julian with dawning suspicion. "For some weeks," Julian continued, his gaze sweeping across the room, lingering briefly on Felicity, "society has been captivated by the sudden musical prowess of Lady Felicity Montrose. Her compositions have been lauded, her performances much admired. Indeed, one particular piece, a waltz, has been heralded as a testament to her unique genius." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "However, it has come to my attention that there has been a serious misattribution." A collective gasp swept through the room, followed by a flurry of whispers. Felicity's complexion paled, her carefully applied rouge standing out starkly. "The true composer of the piece commonly known as Felicity's Fancies," Julian announced, his voice firm and unwavering, "is not Lady Felicity Montrose. It is, in fact, the lady standing beside me, Lady Arabelle Elmswood." He turned, his hand gently resting on Belle's arm, presenting her to the stunned assembly. The Countess of Harbridge's composure finally fractured. "Your Grace, what outrageous accusation is this? This is a monstrous lie," she cried, her voice shrill, drawing every eye to her. "A lie, your ladyship?" Julian's gaze was cold, unyielding. "I assure you, my investigation has been thorough. Lady Arabelle's musical genius was well known in certain circles before her family's unfortunate reversals. I possess irrefutable proof, gathered through diligent inquiry, that the compositions Lady Felicity has presented as her own are, in truth, those penned by Lady Arabelle. Furthermore, I have discovered the sordid arrangements, born of ambition and desperation, by which Lady Arabelle was blackmailed into silence, her past misfortunes leveraged against her, to allow this deceit to perpetuate." His voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "Her family's remaining estate, the last bastion of their dignity, was threatened with seizure by a ruthless moneylender, Miss Silas Blackwood, should she dare to speak the truth." Felicity, now trembling, attempted to interject. I do not know what he speaks of. This is absurd." But her voice was weak, unconvincing against the Duke's formidable presence. Julian ignored her, turning his full attention to Belle, a tender look softening his features. "Lady Arabelle, will you now perform for us the piece you so poignantly named, Whispers in G minor, and other true expressions of your unparalleled talent?" Belle, her heart pounding, stepped forward. Her eyes, filled with emotion, met Julian's, a silent message of gratitude and courage passing between them. She sat at the pianoforte, her hands, which had trembled in the face of injustice, now settled upon the keys with a new-found strength, an undeniable certainty. She began to play. The melody, once a secret solace, now filled the grand hall, soaring with both the profound sorrow of her past struggles and the triumphant resilience of her spirit. Every note was imbued with her authentic soul, resonating with a depth that Lady Felicity's technically correct but hollow performances could never match. The audience was mesmerized. The genuine artistry, the raw emotion, left no doubt. They could feel the truth in the music. When the last, lingering note faded, the silence was deafening. Then, a single gentleman, known for his discerning taste, began to clap. Others quickly followed, a scattered applause swelling into a thunderous ovation. It was a roar of genuine appreciation, a collective acknowledgement of undeniable talent, and a powerful vindication. Tears streamed down the faces of some, touched by the sheer beauty and emotional power of the piece. Belle rose, curtsying deeply, her eyes glistening. She looked towards her parents, who stood with an air of dignified pride, the Marchioness dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Julian stepped forward, his eyes warm with admiration and a quiet triumph. He offered his arm to Belle, his touch firm and protective, guiding her to receive the well-deserved accolades. The crowd parted for them, their whispers now of awe and admiration for Lady Arabelle, and scathing condemnation for the disgraced Countess and Lady Felicity. The Countess and Lady Felicity, their faces a mask of public humiliation, were left to endure the scathing whispers and condemning stares of the ton. Their carefully constructed facade had not merely cracked, it had shattered into irreparable pieces. And so, my dearest readers, the curtain falls on one act of deception and rises on another, far more compelling one. The Duke of Windmere, a true connoisseur of genuine artistry, has not only exposed a scandal, but has, in a single, audacious stroke, championed truth and talent. Lady Felicity Montrose's fancies have indeed melted into thin air, leaving only the echo of her sister's ruined reputation. As for Lady Arabelle, the forgotten lady who once whispered her melodies in G minor, her music, like her spirit, has finally soared into the light. One can only imagine what glorious symphony awaits her now. Ah, dear readers, how swiftly the winds of fortune shift. One day, a lady is shrouded in the humble silks of obscurity, her talents whispered only to sleeping children. The next, she stands bathed in the incandescent glow of public acclaim, her name on every lip. And the Duke? A man of such unwavering conviction, who dared to shatter the brittle facade of society's deceit. The true melody, it seems, always finds its way home. In the days and weeks that followed the extraordinary soirée at Windmere House, the ton was utterly consumed by the scandal and the triumphant vindication of Lady Arabelle Elmswood. Lady Felicity Montrose and the Countess of Harbridge found themselves utterly ostracized, their names synonymous with malice and deceit. Invitations ceased, doors remained closed, and their attempts to re-enter society were met with icy stares and pointedly turned backs. Their ambition had not merely stumbled, it had plummeted into an abyss of social ruin. Meanwhile, a different kind of buzz animated the drawing rooms. Belle, once the unassuming governess, was now the celebrated Lady of the Keys. Requests for her compositions poured in, and prominent hostesses vied for the honor of her presence at their musical evenings. Yet, through it all, Belle remained unchanged in her innate humility and quiet grace. She accepted the accolades with dignity, always deferring praise to the music itself, and never once basking in the downfall of her former tormentors. Julian, the Duke of Windmere, however, was not one to merely champion talent and then retreat. Having uncovered the truth, he now made it his mission to ensure Belle's circumstances were as restored as her reputation. Discreetly, and with the utmost care for the Marquess of Elmswood's fragile pride, Julian's agents approached Mr. Silas Blackwood. Through a series of shrewd negotiations, entirely out of the public eye and initially anonymous, the Duke settled the entirety of the Marquess's colossal debts. One crisp afternoon, a sealed letter bearing the imposing crest of a prestigious London law firm arrived at Thornwood Cottage. Belle, with trembling hands, opened it. Inside, it stated that all outstanding debts owed by the Marquess of Elmswood had been settled in full, and the cottage, along with its small plot of land, was now irrevocably free from any claims. No mention of the benefactor was made, but Belle, catching her father's tearful, bewildered relief, suspected the silent hand of the Duke. "Papa," Belle whispered, her voice thick with emotion, embracing him and then her mother, who silently wiped a tear. "We are free, completely free." The Marquess, tears streaking his weathered face, could only nod, finally able to breathe without the crushing weight of debt. The Marchioness, her composure momentarily forgotten, clasped Belle's hand, a silent symphony of gratitude in her eyes. Julian, meanwhile, began a courtship as discerning and genuine as his initial interest in Belle's music. There were no grand pronouncements in society columns, no ostentatious displays. Instead, he visited Thornwood Cottage, initially under the guise of discussing musical endowments, then simply as a cherished guest. He spoke with the Marquess of Literature and History, and with the Marchioness of Gardens and gentle country pursuits. With Belle, their conversations flowed like the very melodies she composed, intellectually stimulating, deeply personal, and profoundly connecting. He brought her rare first editions, not for their value, but for the beauty of their prose. He shared his own thoughts on philosophy and politics, listening intently to her nuanced replies. He even hummed snippets of a new, complex symphony he was composing, seeking her intuitive insight. He saw not just a gifted musician, but a woman of unwavering integrity, fierce loyalty, and a compassionate heart. One twilight evening, as they strolled through the now tranquil gardens of Thornwood Cottage, the air fragrant with late-blooming roses, Julian stopped by a weathered stone bench. He took Belle's hands in his blue-grey eyes, so often reserved, now brimming with a tender vulnerability. "Arabelle," he began, his voice a low, steady murmur. "My dearest Arabelle, your music first captivated me, for it spoke of a soul utterly authentic. Your courage, your resilience, and your quiet devotion to your family have since captured my heart entirely. I have found in you a depth, an intelligence, and a genuine kindness that surpasses any fortune or title. Will you do me the profound honor of becoming my Duchess? Will you allow me to spend the rest of my days listening to the true, unvarnished symphony of your life by my side?" Belle's heart swelled, tears blurring her vision. This man, who had seen her at her most vulnerable, who had understood the hidden truth of her suffering, was offering her not just a title, but a partnership rooted in profound respect and genuine affection. "Yes, Julian," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of her joy. "1,000 times, yes." Their engagement, when finally announced, was met with universal approval and immense joy across the ton. Not for the usual reasons of rank and fortune, but for the rare triumph of truth and virtue over deception. Lady Arabelle Elmswood, the once-forgotten governess, became the Duchess of Windmere, her story a testament to the enduring power of true talent and integrity. As Duchess, Belle blossomed. She became a passionate and influential patron of young, struggling artists and musicians from all walks of life. She established academies, offered scholarships, and championed talents who might otherwise have been lost to obscurity, just as she almost was. Her painful past became her greatest strength, allowing her to pave the way for others, creating a lasting legacy of genuine artistry, kindness, and opportunity within society. And her personal waltz, Whispers in G minor, once a secret lament, now echoed in the grandest ballrooms, a timeless melody of resilience, truth, and triumphant love. And so, my dearest readers, the final notes of our grand symphony resonate, a tale not merely of titles and fortunes, but of true worth discovered, of melodies reclaimed, and of a love that defied every expectation. For in the grand tapestry of society, it is not the loudest drum, nor the most glittering gown, that truly leaves a lasting impression, but the authentic heart and the music that dares to whisper its truth. If this chronicle has delighted your sensibilities, as I trust it has, I implore you, applaud it with your favor, share its truth with every discerning ear, and ensure your continuing subscription to these very pages, lest you miss a single glorious revelation. Until our next delightful unveiling, I bid you adieu.